Hi everyone, this is Trisha, and I'm back again today with another watercolor project for you using art impression stamps. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create this cute little watercolor watering can. This is part of the new release that Art Impressions had over the last few weeks, and this little watering can is part of the Wishing Well set. We're also going to be using some of the new stamps, the new flowers, and I'm going to be using some oldies but goodies, the vine and the grasses from the original Foliage Set. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ink up the watering can, and first I'm going to be inking it up using some using some African Violet. I'm going to use two colors. I'm going to use some African Violet and I'm also going to use some Sepia. So right here I'm inking you'll notice a few parts I did not ink. That's because I wanted to leave them off so that I could do some foliage around there. So now I'm inking it up with the sepia. And I'm going to stamp it in the middle of my page using some even pressure. I'm working on some Canson XL watercolor paper. I have been using some of the Arches watercolor paper, but I really wanted a soft look, and I'm still not too sure the water to pigment ratio that I'm supposed to be using on the Arches, so things are coming out a little darker than I wanted, and I really wanted this to be light and whimsical, I guess you would call it. So I'm just taking my brush and I'm pulling the color out of the lines. I pulled a little more color underneath that little handle, and then I'm just pulling some out of the sides and I'm pulling it into the middle. You want to make sure you stay in each little section, that you don't go across those lines, that you just pull them into the middle of your focal image. And I see I'm just dabbing it around. I kind of wanted it to look like a hammered metal kind of a look. Using the sepia and the African Violet, it gives you more of a metal kind of a feel, or metal kind of a color. So I'm just going to pull that right out and into the middle of that little pot. You could add some color to that little band if you wanted. I was going to do that, and then I ended up not doing that. So as you can see, that top area is open and that little bottom area is open. That's only because when I put my foliage in, I don't want to have to deal with that line. So I cut out a small mask with some Post-it tape, or it's a Post-it note, but it's the full sticky back. And I'm going to use this little cobblestones. Now the cobblestones go from, the big ones go into, you want those to be at the bottom, and the smaller ones are going to be at the top. That's going to give you the right perspective. And again, I'm inking it up with my African Violet and then inking it up with some sepia. And I stamped it off once because I wanted it to be a little bit lighter. And then I'm just going to stamp it below my little watering can. See, it's very light. And then I'm using more water than I usually use. And I'm going to pull the color right out from below each of those cobblestones. Just very lightly pulling it out. And then I'll use a little bit of the color on top of those cobblestones just to give them a little more interest. And then I'll pull that color right out to the sides of, right out to the sides. I'm just kind of softening them out. I'm going to put some grasses in there and stuff, so that's really not going to be too much of a big deal. So now I'm putting some of the Manganese blue on my palette, which I know is hard to see, but I really wanted to zoom in on the painting itself. So I'm going to take my brush, which has quite a bit of water in it, and then you'll see me lay the color down, and now I'm drying off my brush and just picking some of that color up and trying to soften those lines out. Because I really wanted it to be soft, but I wanted a little bit of color here and there, a little darker color. because I love to do skies, you know that. But instead of using a paper towel, I was just using my brush to soften those lines out. You see there's a little variation in the color, which I like. So now we're going to move on. And I didn't do any editing, so you'll notice that sometimes it takes me a little longer, usually edit out those parts, but I'm not editing any of that out. This is one of the new Foliage Sets. So I'm going to ink up those blooms with some African violet. Then I'm going to come in with my olive green, and I'm going to ink up the stems and the leaves. And I'm not going to go all the way towards the bottom because I don't want to have to mask off my pot, which you can mask it off if you don't feel comfortable. I was pretty comfortable where I wanted the flowers to go, so I wung it. So now there are two of these stamps, one that goes toward the left and one that goes to the right. So now I'm just inking up the one that goes to the right. I think this one's a little bit smaller, but still it's the same image almost. And I'm going to stamp this on the right hand side of that little pot. And I'm stamping it 4 or 5 times, just like we do with any other of our foliage and our flowers. And give it a little variation in color. So now I'm putting the vine from the original Foliage Set, and I'm inking that up with some olive green. And I'm only using the very top, and then I'm stamping it a few times. It's good to get as many times as you can out of it. And I wanted it to come around that little, I don't even know what it's called. The little, not the handle, but the other side. I wanted it to come around that little spout, I guess you call it. So I'm just going to keep inking it up as much as you want, as little as you want. And then I'm going to start on the other side. I was trying to do it instead of moving. What I usually do is I have my stamp right side up and I move my paper around, but when I'm filming, I tend to lose where I am and I go off camera a lot. So this way, what I do is I tape down my project so it doesn't move. So then I have to move my stamp around, or the way I'm holding my stamp. So that's when you'll notice me every once in a while trying to figure out where I want to position things. So I'm going over the little watering can a little bit with some leaves because I want them to look like they're spilling out. And I'm trying to decide what I want to do in that middle area. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to now, before I put anything else in, I'm going to soften up those lines and those blooms. Usually we don't touch any stems, but sometimes I like the look of it when you just touch a few of them and give a little lighter background. It actually makes them pop a little bit more. So I kind of like to do that. I don't like to make them disappear. I just like to make some of them kind of fade into the background so the darker ones come forward. And then I'm just going to add some water. This is Canson paper, like I said, so you don't need a ton of water. When I do my arches, I find I need a lot more water to get a watercolory look. So I'm just not sure which paper I prefer. At this point, I'm really okay with the arches. I have a couple other papers that I'm going to order that I'm going to try out as well. I did a video, or not a video, but I did a before and after. It's not even a before and after. I don't know what I'm saying. I did 3 different pictures on 3 different pieces of watercolor paper. 1 arches, 1 Canson, and 1 Bristol paper, just so you could see the difference that each paper gives. And you really have to play around with them because some of them require more water, some of them require less water. It's just a matter of preference. If you want something very, very vibrant, then you would go with a arches. If you wanted something more watercolory, then I would go with a Canson. I really encourage you to try the papers out though, because there are certain papers that I don't particularly care for because I don't get a good picture out of them. Like I have a hard time with Tim Holtz watercolor paper. For some reason, I don't do well with it. So my pictures don't come out very nice, so I don't use it. So I really do encourage you to try out a bunch of different papers and see which ones you like the most. So now I'm just adding some water to the blooms. And I'm really adding water to the light ones first and then coming into the darker ones because I want those light ones to really stay light. So now that that's all dry, things dry very, very fast. I know you can see the water as I'm doing this, and then you can see the water's gone like pretty quickly. So I finally decided, okay, what was I going to use for that middle? I decided to do these two little stems here just to give a little bit of something else. And I'm going to use some magenta and the olive green. And you can't see me inking it up, but I am inking it up. And I'm just going to stamp that 4 or 5 times into the middle of that little basket. Now you can see there's a little spot in the very center that looks kind of lost. I'll fill that in after I soften these lines up. Because this is pink and I wanted to be very careful because if you mix pink and green you're going to get some kind of brown. So I didn't want to put too much green in there before I put the water on these blooms. So now I'm going to come in with the vine and I'm just going to fill in that middle area. Now that I know everything's in and looks good. And I'll add a little bit of water. You just remember you're going to leave some white space in there. You're not going to fully color it all in. You want to have white, darks, lights, and white space in there. So now I'm going to take these 3 little hearts from the new mini flower set. This is one of my favorite stamps. I'm just loving it. And I'm going to ink it up with some violet. And I'm going to place just a few of these little flowers around in the greenery just to give it a little bit of color. I love color. So I'm just going to stamp it here and there. They look like little hearts. They're so cute. So just ink it up and stamp it a couple of times. And then I'll add the water, which will really bring the color right out of those little flowers. So to finish up our project, the last thing we're going to do is I'm going to ink up the grasses and I'm going to walk them out as we do 5 times, a walk to the left or walk to the right on top of each other. And then I'm going to put a few behind and then just a couple in the front there. I don't want the cobblestones to disappear, but I just wanted them to fade away a little bit. And I'm going to put some water on my brush, and using a brush stroke, I'm going to pull the color out of the lines. And then I'm going to use a little bit of water just to pull some of that color underneath too. As you can see, I'm not using a ton of water on this. Just using the tip of my brush to pull that color out. Now there's a little area right there on the left side that I didn't think had enough color in it, and I was just pulling these up a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take I'm going to take it and I'm going to ink this grass back up and stamp it a few more times. And now all you do, your final step is to sign and date it. And that's it. That's our project for today. So thank you so much for joining me. I do on my blog have some more details of how I put the card together itself. And I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. I've attached a couple more videos here that I thought you might be interested in. And again, I really, really appreciate all my subscribers and thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Have a great day.